Hi everyone, welcome back to EE with Ruben. Last episode, we've talked about how externalities and market failures can cause environmental degradation. So today, we're going to focus on the most well-known issue facing our planet economy, climate change. Today, we'll explore how economists understand climate change and what tools like carbon taxation and pricing are. We'll also learn how to balance mitigation and adaptation strategies for global sustainability. Let's start. Climate change isn't just a scientific or environmental challenge. It's also a major economic issue, mainly because it stems from a market failure. The problem lies in how fossil fuels are priced. When coal, oil, or gas is burned, it releases greenhouse gases that contribute to the climate change. But again, the environmental damage like floods, fires, and extreme heat isn't reflected in the price of those fuels. That cost is pushed onto society. We studied this. It's called negative externalities. See, the disconnect between private gain and public costs is why economists like Nicholas Stern called climate change the greatest market failure the world has ever seen. So, economists ask, how do we make these polluters pay for the true cost of their carbon emissions? A strong answer to this is carbon pricing. Carbon pricing is a policy that puts a price on each ton of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere. There are two main approaches for carbon pricing: carbon tax and the cap and trade emission system. So, the first is carbon tax. Carbon tax is a fixed fee charged for every ton of CO2 emitted. For example, if a power plant emits 1,000 tons of CO2, the carbon tax is $50 per ton. So they owe $50,000 of tax. The more you pollute, the more you pay. The logic behind it is simple. By increasing the cost of emitting carbon, polluting becomes less profitable, and companies start shifting towards cleaner alternatives. Consumers also respond to higher prices by seeking more energy-efficient products or reducing fossil fuel use. Economists love this method because it's transparent, predictable, and cost-effective. Let's take Sweden as a real-world example. In 1991, Sweden implemented one of the highest carbon taxes in the world, now over $130 per ton. Since then, the country has reduced emissions by 30%, while its economy has grown significantly. So, it's a myth that carbon taxes hurt growth. In fact, they can drive innovation and cleaner economic activity. Another popular example is British Columbia, in Canada, which implemented a carbon tax in 2008 starting at $10 per ton and gradually increased it. Gasoline consumption dropped by 12% over 4 years, while economic growth stayed on par with the rest of Canada. What made it politically popular was that the revenue from the tax was returned to residents through tax cuts. This brings us to an important point. A carbon tax doesn't have to mean taking money from people. If designed properly, the revenue can be used to lower other taxes, fund clean energy projects, or assist low-income households. The second method is the cap and trade or emissions trading system. This system puts a limit on total emissions and creates a market for companies to buy and sell emission permits. If a company reduces its emission below its cap, then it can sell the excess permits to a higher emitting firm. This gives everyone a financial incentive to emit less. The EU emissions trading system is the largest example. Since 2005, emissions from the sector it covers have fallen by more than 40%. Both systems, taxes and cap and trade, internalize the externality. That means they make the polluter pay for the true social costs of their pollution, and they encourage the economy to shift gradually towards cleaner alternatives. Carbon pricing is part of a broader climate strategy, which involves two strategies to combat climate change, called mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation refers to actions taken to reduce the cause of climate change. This includes actions like switching to renewable energy sources, increasing energy efficiency, promoting reforestation, developing carbon capture and storage technologies, or electrifying transport and reducing coal dependence. Adaptation, on the other hand, is about preparing for and reducing the harm from climate impacts that are already happening or are unavoidable. This includes actions like building flood barriers and seawalls, improving early warning systems, designing climate-resilient infrastructure, or developing drought-resistant crops. Economically, both mitigation and adaptation can be assessed using cost-benefit analysis. For example, investing $1 in climate resilience can yield $4 in avoided damages, according to the World Bank. But adaptation requires foresight and funding, which many vulnerable countries lack. A major question in climate economics is who should pay. Historically, the US and European countries are responsible for the majority of carbon emissions. But today, countries like China and India are the largest current emitters due to their growing economies. So, should all countries be held to the same standard? This dilemma led to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, embedded in the Paris Agreement, which asked developed nations to lead on climate action and support developing countries financially. That's why there was a pledge to provide $100 billion a year in climate finance from rich countries to poorer ones. But by 2023, that promise had not fully been kept, which continues to cause friction in the international climate talks. If we fail to act, the long-term economic cost could be enormous. The Stern Review estimated that unchecked climate change could reduce global GDP by 5 to 20% annually through extreme weather, agricultural collapse, and health disasters. In contrast, the cost of preventing the worst-case scenarios? About 1% of global GDP per year. So, acting on climate change isn't just a moral responsibility, it's smart economics. By investing in mitigation, building adaptive capacity, and pricing carbon properly, we're not just avoiding catastrophe, we're building a more resilient, efficient, and innovative global economy.